What does the safety coordinator actually do? I bet if you were to ask 10 different people, you're going to probably get 10 different answers. Some will tell you that that's the person that does inspections, investigate accidents, probably conduct a little training. Some will say, hey, that's the OSHA guy. And unfortunately, some will probably tell you that's the person that walks around that tells everybody else what they can't do. That should not be the job. At least it shouldn't be the job. Like I said, the safety coordinator's role is so much bigger than that. They're there to help the organization identify risk, identify hazards in the workplace, to evaluate those risks, to put effective controls in place, and to educate employees, and to make sure that all of this comes together for the better of the job. In my previous video, Who is the Safety Coordinator, we talked about that position and really why it matters. Today, we're going to take it to the next step. We're going to break down the actual roles and responsibilities of the safety coordinator. And by the end of this video, you'll have a much better understanding of the job and what it really involves. So, I'm Tim, and let's get this video started. You know, one of the most fundamental responsibilities of a safety coordinator is identifying hazards. That sounds simple, doesn't it? But it's not. A hazard is something that's may be obvious, it may not be obvious. Sometimes it might be something as simple as a damaged electrical cord, extension cord. Might be a unguarded machine. And sometimes it might be something like, let's say, improperly labeled, or chemicals that's not labeled at all. Well, I've been down that road before. You know, it could be a work process that encourages employees to take shortcuts. That's a little harder to see there, isn't it? And it might be a supervisor who doesn't really understand all the hazards that's associated with a particular job. It may be that an employee has performed a job for 20 years and nobody's really asked the question, is there a safer way of doing this? The safety coordinator or someone needs to ask, is there a way we can do this so that nobody gets hurt? Or a better question, are we doing it today so that someone could not get hurt tomorrow? Identifying a hazard is only the beginning. I guess the question is, how much risk does the hazard actually create? Not every hazard presents the same level of risk. We know that. A safety coordinator has to evaluate the likelihood of something happening and the potential severity if it does. For example, you might identify a trip hazard in a hallway. Okay, that's a hazard. But now consider a worker operating a machine with a missing guard. Okay, the potential consequence here is a lot different. A safety coordinator needs to help the organization prioritize those risks. What needs to be addressed immediately, or corrective actions need to be put in place today? And what controls will actually reduce that risk? This is where the safety coordinator moves from simple identifying problems to helping the organization manage those risks. You know, once we've actually identified the hazard and evaluated it, the next responsibility is actually determining how we're going to control it. And this is where the hierarchy of controls really becomes important. It's a staple within the process. Can we eliminate the hazard or substitute something safer? What about engineering controls, or do we look further into administrative controls? And if none of these work, do we use appropriate personal protective equipment, or PPE? A lot of times, a common mistake is actually jumping right off straight into using PPE. Put on your gloves, wear your safety glasses, be careful out there. A good safety coordinator asks the question, can we eliminate or control the hazard before it ever reaches the employee? That's a little bit different mindset, very different mindset, where we're not simply asking the employee to be, hey, you just need to be more careful out there. We're asking, how can we make this job safer for everybody? Another major responsibility of a safety coordinator is training and education. But here's something important. Training isn't simply putting a PowerPoint presentation on a screen and having the employees sign a roster or sign-in sheet. It don't work that way. Effective training should always ask 3 questions. 1, what is the hazard? 2, how can it hurt me? And 3, what do I need to do to protect myself or yourself? That's the training. Depending on the organization, the safety coordinator may be involved in a lot of different things, from hazard communication to PPE, fall protection training, lockout, tagout, ergonomics, all your emergency procedures, fire safety, powered industrial trucks, and confined space, maybe trenching and shoring. And the safety coordinator needs to understand something. Training does not automatically equal competence. An employee can sit down in a 2-hour class and still not understand how to perform his job safely. The real test happens when that employee walks back out onto the job. We can do a whole video on training and education right by itself. In fact, we may just do that. The next area that we're going to take a look at is inspections and audits. Safety coordinators often are responsible for conducting inspections, but the goal of an inspection shouldn't be able to create a giant list of everything that's wrong. The goal should be really to identify hazards before they actually become incidents. A good inspection asks several questions. What has changed? What processes have changed? Are employees working differently than they were 6 months ago? And here's a question that every safety coordinator really should ask. Are we fixing the same problem over and over again? If you're finding this same issue every time you do an inspection, you may not have a compliance problem. You may have a systems problem. And that's where the safety coordinator really needs to dig in just a little deeper. Another major responsibility of the safety coordinator is actually investigating those incidents and near misses. I have another video in the safety coordinator series on actual near misses, and I'll put a link to it in the description. But I do want to emphasize the word near miss. Someone almost got hurt. Something almost happened. So what are we seeing? We're actually seeing a warning. And those events give us an opportunity to learn before something actually happens, before that fatality or that injury, before that fire, before a major property loss. The safety coordinator should help determine what happened. Why did it happen? What conditions actually contributed to it? Did our systems fail us? And most importantly, what are we doing to change so it really doesn't happen again? A weak investigation looks a lot of times, unfortunately, for someone to blame. And that should not be the case at all. A strong investigation looks for why the system allowed the event to happen. Another area that we need to take a look at is number 7, corrective actions. As you know, finding a problem isn't enough. Writing it down isn't enough. Sending an email out to somebody isn't enough. The safety coordinator has to make sure that the corrective actions actually happen. This is one of the responsibilities that can separate an effective safety coordinator from an ineffective one. If you identify a hazard on Monday and it's still there 6 months, you haven't really solved the problem now, have you? You documented the problem. That's what happened. There's a huge, huge difference. A good safety coordinator takes or tracks corrective actions, assigns responsibilities, establishes reasonable deadlines, and follows up. He verify. Because ultimately, a hazard isn't corrected because it wasn't identified. It was corrected because someone actually took action. This next section we really don't talk about enough at all, and that's regulatory compliance. Of course, everybody knows that compliance is a huge part of the safety coordinator's job. And actually, dependent on the organization itself, the safety coordinator may be responsible for helping the company comply with OSHA regulations, NFP requirements, and a whole host of other requirements. That can also include things like maintaining records, reviewing written programs, your SDS program, OSHA logs, coordinating required training and for inspections, and staying aware of upcoming regulatory requirements. But here's the important distinction. Compliance should be the floor, not the ceiling. If the only reason your organization fixes a hazard is because OSHA requires it, you may have compliance, but you don't necessarily have a good safety culture. The goal should be, we do this because it's required and because it's the right thing to do. This next section, emergency preparedness, is a huge role a lot of times for the safety coordinator. The safety coordinators may have this responsibility to go along with everything else. And that can include your emergency action plan, your evacuation procedures, fire prevention plans, severe weather plans. There's a lot that goes into this to making sure that everything actually comes together. The question isn't, do we have an emergency plan? The better question is, would our employees know what to do if an emergency was to happen right now? Because a plan sitting in a binder doesn't mean that it's going to protect anybody. People, preparation, and practice actually is what makes it happen. So run the drill. Let's dive into the last section, PPE and safety equipment. The safety coordinator may also be responsible for helping to determine the actual appropriate PPE and safety equipment for the employee. But again, PPE isn't as simple as handing someone a pair of safety glasses and saying, hey, put these on. The coordinator needs to consider the hazard itself, the level of exposure, the equipment's limitations, and the employee's training. Have they been properly trained? What about proper fit of the equipment, maintenance of the equipment, and replacement? Is the employee been trained on all of this? And the bigger question actually still remains, is PPE really the best control? Or is the better question, is there a better way to eliminate or reduce the hazard before we even go here? Something to think about. So what does this really mean for the safety coordinator? Now, if you look at these 10 responsibilities, you may be thinking, man, that's a lot. And really it is. But here's the key. The safety coordinator isn't necessarily the person who is personally performs every task. The role is often to coordinate, facilitate, advise, monitor, and follow up. It also helps to bring the right people and resources together to solve these safety problems or safety issues. And that distinction is important. If a hazard is found in a department, the safety coordinator shouldn't automatically be the person responsible for fixing it, by no means. That department itself owns that problem or that issue. They're the ones responsible for it. The safety coordinator himself helps to identify it, yes, communicates the risk probably to the department and recommends solutions, and then verify that it was actually completed and everything was taken care of. That's coordination. And that's very different from the person who is expected to personally fix everything. Okay? So what does a safety coordinator actually do? A lot, from identifying hazards to ensuring the right PPE and safety equipment for those hazards. But that's only part of the story, because knowing what a safety coordinator actually does is one thing, but knowing how to be an effective safety coordinator at the job is something completely different. So don't forget to subscribe and follow us here at Joko Safety Solutions. And always remember, safety's first, and coffee, well, that's always second. Until we meet again, take care, stay safe.